Thank you. It's great to be here. It was perhaps not the lead up I had expected, but anyway, we'll take it from there. So yes, my name is Thomas. I'm from Denmark. Classic shipping education. When I was 20, I was sent to Hong Kong. Met my future wife there. She's from India. We moved to China. Spent some time in China. Learned about that, and then I went to the United States. We had 2 kids born in New Jersey, and moved back to corporate at Maersk, where my last tenure there was global cold chain executive. And in that capacity, I met quite a lot of people down here, including Dian Joubert, and he introduced me to Justin and Hannes and so on, and full circle. That's why I'm here today, to give some thoughts on what's going on in global shipping, but also to give you a little bit of an update on what have we been doing, because we got hired by the CGA board initially back in Q3, and that became a broader initiative supported by all the fraternities, and most recently by FPF. So just quick background. You know, when we do advisory, we are fairly privileged because we focus specifically on cold chain. So we work in 3, if you think about a triangle, there are 3 angles to that. One angle is we follow the fruit, all the meats and proteins, and we do advice for very large players. For example, the biggest protein trader in the world. We do work with Walmart on cargo, etc., etc. So that's one dimension we get. The other dimension we work on is on the asset side, so a lot of stuff on ports. So we just heard a lot about ports here, but we also work with ports in Philadelphia or in Wanimi or in the Middle East and so on, and we help them think through how can you extend your cold chain footprint, because everybody wants more reefer cargo in through their ports and the communities. And the last piece is on the money side. We spend quite a lot of time with financial institutions. We work on M&A and help merge companies and so on and so. And all this work in a triangle allows us to put a couple of pieces together. So let me make the first observation, which is pretty obvious. The global supply chain is a complete mess. Certainly was a complete mess in 22. But as I will talk about now, it's getting better in the supply chain. Cold chain, what people tend to forget if they're not in it, is that there's a reason why it's called a chain. It's a series of events that needs to happen in a logical order. And when things go wrong in the supply chain for dry cargo, whether you are Nike or you are Sony or whatever you are, well, the answer to that is you have to build more resilience into your cold chain or to your dry supply chain, meaning basically build inventories and make it more expensive, actually, just in case supply chain. Well, guess what? That doesn't work in a cold chain. You don't have the luxury of building inventories and so on. So it's a completely different landscape. And you could say in a lot of the work we do, we have to spend a lot of time to educate people that this is a completely different landscape. This is the Rolls-Royce or the Formula One of shipping. That's a cold chain. So with that in mind, let me just share a little bit on my agenda today. We thought it'd be helpful just to paint the global picture, what's going on first, and then I'll go into the study we have done specifically on South Africa, draw a couple of conclusions, and then I'll share with you some of the major news that we're working on. This is a big group, and a lot of the work we do for the groups here are under NDA, so I can't be fully transparent, but I like to be fairly direct. So if I don't get the Q&A from you guys, I'll make my own Q&As and ask some of the more frequently asked questions we get. So if we look at the global markets, usually the reefer market has been the most, so you could say, resilient. There's been a strong correlation historically between demand and population growth and wealth accumulation. So if you were a shipping line, you were planning, you were pretty happy with the reefers because it always went pretty well. Whereas the dry cargo has been a little bit more subject to financial cycles. Now, in 22, that thing changed completely. So we've actually seen a drop in reefer cargo last year. And why is that? Well, first of all, if you try to portray it over a calendar year, and what you see on this slide here is actually that towards the end of the year, the year-on-year drop in reefer fresh cargo has dropped to the tune of 8%. And that has taken everybody by surprise, because most people, when they do their planning, they look at Drewry or Seabury and others and say, okay, it's 4% compound growth on a demand side. But the way we should look at it is much more on the supply side. Because the reason why we're seeing the drop here is because of financial duress that the farmers in South Africa have been under. And the same thing we have observed and seen in Chile, in Argentina, it's almost been an onslaught. So as we look at the crystal ball for the next year, we are also seeing a drop in global reefer volumes. And that's pretty significant actually, because what's been happening in the normal planning is you just say, okay, 3-4% compound, I'll buy some more equipment and we're ready to go. Now we are seeing an unprecedented stop almost in supply, where from an agricultural point of view, you have to make a decision, can I afford to ship to my customers? And the answer in many cases is no. And I'll get into that on the shipping, how important the shipping cost has been to, you could say, the deterioration of shipping. The term I use is ripflation. You want to understand how much are you being ripped off. So we've actually mapped that for you, and you got ripped off by quite a bit last year, I can tell you that. That's not a secret. But you were not the only country that got ripped off. In fact, other countries got ripped off even more. So when I took this on assignment to help farmers and exporters here in South Africa, I actually cautioned a little bit and say, be careful, because you may not be in a better spot when the COVID has lifted. And what we've just witnessed here in the last couple of slides is that you are actually in the worst spot now than you were a year ago. Why is that? That's because everywhere else, the infrastructure has improved and the supply demand has changed. So things are now moving freely in other markets. The only place where it doesn't work is here. Maybe a little bit harsh, but you're certainly challenged much more on infrastructure than your colleagues in Chile or Peru. So a little bit on what's happening globally. I could talk to this one for a long time, but what I will say is that if I was in agricultural business and I looked at my 2060 vision or had growth ambitions, I would feel fairly comfortable being a South African. Why? Well, because you're actually in an ideal spot. You are the best ones supplying Asia, India, Middle East, where the growth is. I know most of us, we like to talk about Europe, and I'm living in Europe, but forget about Europe in the long run. Forget about Russia. It's all happening in the Middle East and Asia. So I think from that point of view, if I look at the longer term potential, I've built ships that were way too small, and I think the 260 vision is incredibly realistic. It might be even modest if we can get the fundamentals right. And that's, of course, a big if. Just a couple of other highlights from last year. This was not an easy year to be a farmer. I get that. I mean, on a good day, maybe 20% of ships came on time. Now we are getting up to 50% on time. I was just chairing a shipping conference in Long Beach 2 weeks ago, where we had a look at the global cold chain from various vantage points. And somebody said we should aspire to get to 70% accuracy on our shipping. And I know, having just heard the previous couple of presentations, you would probably die for 70%, but it's pathetic. When we do work with the banana industry, if they are not at 98%, they're in trouble. So to be at 50% is also pretty pathetic. One thing that happened to the detriment of you last year was that all the ships were principally full with well-paying dry cargo around the world. So if you were a ship planner and you had to decide, am I put empty containers to South Africa or should I load a dry container with revenue at $10,000, what would you do? You would, of course, take the dry revenue. And that meant that it was very difficult to supply empties down here, but certainly also to a lot of other places in the world. And now I'm hearing the other complaint, actually. Now, people, when I was here in January, somebody was complaining there are too many reefer containers sitting empty in South Africa. I said, whoa, oh, things changed. But I don't see bottlenecks as far as equipment is concerned worldwide. Definitely not. We're swimming in reefer equipment. And there's a couple of shipping lines here as well. And we represent leasing companies. And 6 months ago, when we asked them, can we have a project, can we get some equipment? They would say, forget about it. I can build something for you. I need a 7-year back-to-back. Now, they'll say, if I need to lease 5,000 containers, you can get them tomorrow. So that has changed. Earlier, there was reference to record profits. I think that's definitely a thing of the past. I was with an analyst that covers the shipping stock here the other day, and she thought that Maersk would go in red figures in the second half of this year. That's not what Maersk is guiding. But if you take the spot rates that are now moving around in the dry business, and you consider that the cost to serve you has actually gone up significantly as a shipping line, all the air costs have also gone up, then it's very conceivable, in my view, that you'll see red figures from some lines in the second half. I think Maersk has a more resilient strategy. I don't think they will go red necessarily, but other shipping lines will be. And the only thing worse than shipping lines making a lot of money, that's shipping lines making no money, because then it's forget about getting any favors. I can see in the work we do with shipping lines that they are actually investing a lot of capex into innovation, smarter containers, more cold treatment capabilities, and so on. So there's hope inside. I think they're no dummies. I mean, it was a very exceptional situation we had with the dry rates being so much higher than the reefer rates. That has changed now. The reefer rates are still in high demand. So when we talk to the CEOs of various shipping lines, they want more reefer cargo. But they probably didn't realize that there would be less to play for. And that's actually a good thing from a competitive standpoint in this market here, because you should see more hunger for your business than you've seen in the last 2 years. It could be famous last words, I don't know, but that's at least my prediction. I won't go into Ukraine now. So back in summer of last year, we were asked to help the various food fraternities to think through logistics. The starting point was a meeting in Berlin with Hannes de Waal, where he said, I think this is going to be the worst year ever for citrus, 22, and I don't know what to do about it, but we think we need some help. And I've known Hannes for a long time, and I said, Hannes, you are South African. You know everything. You don't need any help, do you? He said, well, give us a chance. So we came together and said this was an interesting challenge, having worked here on the container side for many years and understanding your competitive landscape. So basically the number one charter was, please make this go away. We can't have this bottleneck anymore, and explore alternatives for us. So what I've done now in the last couple of years, and I'll share some of the findings, is that I've been your ambassador in a number of places. I've changed sides. Now I'm almost a farmer, grower, exporter. So we said, how can we communicate our story a little bit more compelling, realizing that the brand of being a farmer is not necessarily great, because the label would be, you always complain. So maybe if somebody like me would come in and try and tell the story from a different narrative and a little bit more balanced, maybe we can get some traction. So here in the last 6 weeks or so, I've been on a world tour in Berlin and Long Beach, and trying to tell the story of how actually the greedy shipping lines killed the South African citrus industry. We use the citrus industry actually as a case story. I'm also telling them that you are actually the largest exporter in the world by ocean. You're not the world's largest exporter, but if I go by ocean and we separate that and we take the truck out, you are the world's largest exporter. That's a nice story. But we are seeing complete value destruction. Overall, it's based on number of input costs, of course, have gone up, but also shipping has largely speaking doubled. We have then, through the CGA and the work with farmers and your local authorities here, we've tried to map out, what are actually the returns to farm. So we're using your data actually And it's pretty clear that when we share that with the shipping lines, they're beginning to say, I did not understand it was so bad. So if I take the call and I talk to my old golfing buddy, Søren Toft, who's now the CEO of MSC, he didn't know because he told his guys to charge $17,000 for citrus to Canada. And guess what? People still loaded, at least initially, at $17,000. So they think, oh, that must mean that they're profitable. So we had a big miscommunication. All the interviews I've done with local shipping lines here, they get it. They're on your side. But the issue is how do you influence the corporate head office? How do you make them understand it? So I believe we're making some traction now trying to make them understand what's going on. And if this continues, then there's basically no business. What is the right number to carry citrus? I don't know. But what I do know is that we are in a supply-demand situation. And if you think about it from the outside, we have a monopoly on ports in South Africa today, and we have a duopoly on shipping in South Africa today. Sorry, John from CMA. But essentially, you have a Maersk-led initiative and an MSC-led initiative. This is the only place in the world where this happens. The only place. So and the project we are working on here are trying to address the shipping side, but it's of course very evident that if we can't get more throughput through the terminals, we can't get new players to come. So I don't think it's going to make you feel any better, but when we did the benchmarks, you are not the only ones losing a lot of money, and projections for this year are pretty dire around the world. The Chilean grape season is about to come to an end. That has been a horrible year. They were saying for their season that ended in April last year, they thought the shipping cost them about $100 million in losses just because things were not working into Philadelphia. And there is no good source for all this, how big the impact has been, but it's in the billions of dollars of lost revenue to the shipping lines now because people don't load. We were quite excited when we did the mapping last year that you had some very serious players here who said to the shipping lines, guess what, you can take your container back. And the shipping lines said, what are you talking about? I don't want your container because I understand my numbers and this doesn't make sense for me to ship, you can have it back. That raised a few eyebrows. Unfortunately, and this is the flip side of how some of you guys trade your fruit, all the guys that are still shipping on consignment, I don't get it. I don't understand. You nurture your fruit and you care for it so much, and then you ship it and you leave it to a Dutch guy to get a return. So as we point fingers at shipping lines and fertilizers, there's also a little bit of soul searching, I think, in how we're set up as an industry. So just a couple of, I'll go into the project. So the initial conclusions we made about October of last year. So I'm speaking to the choir here, I realize that, but obviously the fruit industry, complete disarray, massive value destruction, and about to continue, so we can forget about the 260 plan, and it's going to be maybe a 60 plan if something doesn't happen on shipping. But we also observed as independent advisors, guys, you guys are so fragmented. You play by segment and you compete against your neighbor, and as long as you do that, then the chances that we can raise the bar and get an intelligent conversation with shipping lines and say, how do we work smarter? How do we work smarter with the port? It's close to zero. So a very good thing I think that came out of the CGA initiative on the shipping was that we managed to get all the other groups together, and now we have a framework to discuss it. And we have also taken it upon us to negotiate with new shipping lines and say, we think that the industry is ready now to collaborate and team up together, and if that means we have to commit X thousand containers to get a new player to the market, we'll do that. And if you had asked me when I started if that would be possible, I would have been very skeptical, but I guess when we have so much pain, we learn we have to collaborate. Let me move on. So what have we done in the last couple of months? Had a lot of exchange with headquarters of various shipping lines. We're not ruling anybody out. So, you start at the top, sort of start with MSC. How do you see the South African market? What's your long-term plans? And so on and so. And MSC is great, of course. They're buying ships left, right, and center. And they, in my view, will hit maybe 25% market share of global shipping. They're still not the biggest in the reefer space. Maersk is by far the biggest. Maersk has a clear strategy. They want to be the integrator of choice. And I think they're succeeding on many parameters in the dry space. In the reefer space, the jury is still very much out. Sorry, Mark. But they have a plan. And we may not like the plan, but I understand what the plan is. And we say, okay, so you guys are not looking to grow significantly on just pure ocean volume. Okay, fine. Then we need to find somebody who wants to grow with us. Because to get to 260, we need more choice. We need others. So I'm not going to go through the conversations under NDA with various carriers, but I would say there's quite a lot of interest. This is still the sort of the jewel. If you can get a service with reefer cargo from South Africa into Europe or a relay service somewhere, I think a lot of the second-tier shipping lines, sorry, John, would love to do that. And you will catch up eventually. So a lot of good constructive dialogue. As part of my debrief to the fraternities, it's extremely difficult because I know, what did they say? When can Seatrade build some ships for us and so on? Please respect that these things take a little bit of time, and we will keep you posted on that. But there's some good movement. Other things I would just highlight of potentially good news, as some of you guys have not concluded your shipping arrangement yet. If you haven't done it yet, that was really smart. Maybe some went too early on this thing, but things are changing. I'll show it a little bit graphically. So the container charter rates, that is basically the rate that if you are a CMA or a Maersk and you say, let me go out to the general market, see if I can lease a ship for X amount of time. You will see that there's been a massive drop in that rate. So that also signals that there's a lot of tonnage out there. So it's pretty easy to get ships now, and the price have come down. If we look at the order book and take a look at the long year, the order book means how much is now placed on a shipyard in China, Japan, Korea versus the current fleet, worldwide fleet. So when a number is 30, it means basically you see 30% extra capacity already committed to come to the market in the next 2-3 years. 30%. If you add to that last year we had the worst port congestion in mankind that absorbed about 10% where ships were just waiting. Remember last year they were waiting in Long Beach, also here. Now they don't wait in Long Beach, but here. But that has freed up a lot of capacity. So in our view, maybe you're looking at potentially 35-40% extra capacity being freed up. This will be absorbed by a number of things like scrapping and the new environmental rules that are coming in, where most likely several ships will have to go a little bit slower. That may absorb 7-8% of the tonnage. But it's still principally, there's a lot of ships coming. It's a better time to be in procurement, I can tell you that. But the challenge remains, how do we get them in here? We already saw the effect in Q1. If you were shipping out of the west coast of South America into US East Coast, the rate started at $10,000 and it dropped below $5,000 pretty quickly because there was competition. And when we talk to various shipping lines, they're all like, I got extra ships now. Do you have some good ideas? Put them on transatlantic, come in here, and so on. So I think there's some things that are helping. If you then add to my data from earlier that the global reefer trades are dropping a little bit, and the rates are still attractive, that means the shipping lines CEOs are asking their global reefer bosses, get me some more cargo. And at your current rates, it should be pretty attractive. So I'm not here to offer sort of general procurement advice on stage necessarily. That's not my job. But I think the odds have changed, and I think for the shipping lines in the audience, I think at least your bosses in a corporate, they understand that by now they understand it, that they were about to kill the golden goose. And the number that people keep throwing at me is like, if we could get back to pre-COVID, we would be great. You will probably get back to pre-COVID one day, but it's not going to happen overnight from here. But having a fair market rate where you also can compete with the places like Peru or Indian grapes, etc., that's only a reasonable ask. So there's a little bit of the bottlenecks are disappearing just a little bit. And let me finish actually with what a bottleneck actually means. So at the TPM last year, my good friend Jeremy Nixon from O&E, he presented a bottleneck story to the audience, which I thought was great. So I've just stolen it from him. But basically what he's illustrating is that, from a production standpoint, if you are doing dry productions in Asia, 7/24, everything is working fine. And they'll produce enough stuff out of Foxconn or whatever. And at the port level in Asia, 7/24, a lot of it is fully automated, no issue, right? And you cascade that through, then you hit the bottleneck in Long Beach or in California or so and so. And then things will simply not flow through because they were not ready for it. So the good news is we don't see those bottlenecks right now. I think there's a consensus that globally we haven't learned anything. And we've kind of maybe just in a little bit of a lull now because inventories have been high. So if we start seeing a spike again of 5-10% volumes, some of these bottlenecks in the US, they're going to be back on. I've been tempted to make this bottleneck from a South African export standpoint. You almost have to change the bottle a little bit, right? But this is really serious stuff, and I think a forum like this is ideal to get some of the issues up. I think we've seen from the previous presenters, this is not easy. If I was in charge, I know what I would do: privatize. I don't know any market in the world where something so critical has not been outsourced to private entities. Let the professionals run the ports. You can be the landlord and actually save the taxpayers a lot of money on capex, and you get income every year. So that would be, if I was ever asked, that would be my one advice: privatize the hell out of these ports. And we don't have to worry about straddle carriers and stuff like that. That's not a government job, in my humble opinion. So I think I'll close with that.